Hello, welcome back. Today I'm having a conversation with Dr. Darla Bishop. She's known as the Financial Sis. She's a financial coach, an author, and she's an expert on paying for college, which is perfect because I have a son in college. I have a daughter who's completed college. I know how stressful and difficult it is to come up with an understanding of how do you navigate this without just resorting to student loans, which I know many of us want to avoid if we can. So I invited Darla to come and have a conversation and share what she learned on her pathway of paying for college all the way up to her doctorate level, things that she learned that really, really, really touched the bottom line, both helped herself as well as her husband to avoid financial student loans, to find many different ways to pay for college. So that's what we're talking about. She emphasizes the importance of students taking an active role, right, versus as parents doing it all for them. So we'll get into that and so much more. I know that you're going to take a lot away from this if you.
Darla, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. I am familiar with your work. I know that you've got a book coming out, you've written other books, you are known for financial coaching. And I'm so excited to have this conversation about how to pay for college. And so, one thing that I thought we would dive into are just like setting the stage of what would you say are the main options available for students and families to pay for college?
So there is, of course, good hard cash, which if you've seen, and I know you have personal relevant experience here, tuition bills, maybe that isn't as accessible to many of us as we'd like it to be. So we've got scholarships, so those and grants. So those are monies that are provided to the student either by the university or outside organizations with no requirement to give the money back. There are student loans, and those come in a few different flavors. They come in government loans or federal loans, as well as private loans with or without a parent co-signing or attaching themselves to the loan. And then there are other more creative ways to pay for, which is what I would love for us to talk about today.
Oh, that's so good. I love it. Well, I mean, we know that this is an ongoing, difficult challenge for many people because the cost of education just keeps going up and up and up, and it doesn't really show any signs of changing. And so, I'm guessing that for a lot of people, even though they may have estimated how much it's going to cost when their little ones are young, the costs go up, the expenses go up for everything for raising children. And then you find that you have not necessarily saved enough money and you have to dive into what are all the options. And I'm guessing that most people, ideally speaking, don't want to pass the whole entire bill of college onto their children if they can avoid it. And easier said than done. So I love this conversation. I have two children, one who is in his second year at ASU, and my daughter graduated from Cal Poly many years ago, 7 years ago, I think, maybe less. It all runs together. but, but financing two children in college, our goal has been for them not to owe anything by the time they're done with school. And I know that's like a really big goal, but I'm sure with your help that's you're going to help us get through this, right? You're going to help us have some ideas. So what are these unique things that you found that can help people, help families?
So I have to start by telling you the reason I know what I'm talking about is it took me 8 years, but I have a doctorate. And do you know I did that doctorate at one of the most expensive universities in the country and I took zero new debt.
That's so exciting.
And this is the mug that my mom got me to celebrate. It's doctor, actually.
Woo, yay. Dr. Darla. Yes, that's amazing. So
And so
you've
the
lived this.
yes, and I when I went to college the first time, because I've been about 3 times, when I went to college the first time, my parents absolutely loved me and were so excited for me to go, but they didn't have nothing for me but love and emotional support.
Mhm.
So over the 15 years I was in higher education, I saw how other people figured out how to pay it. I found my own way so that by the time I was getting my doctorate, I was able to achieve that by doing it with zero new debt. So one of the first things that I always recommend to people, and this applies a little bit more to that older student, maybe who's going to graduate school, or maybe they spend a few years working first, is making that decision about where you'll go to school and whether you're going to be a full-time student who works a little bit or a full-time employed person who studies a little bit, right? Because depending on where you are in your life stage, taking a couple of years, 5 years off of working might not be a viable choice. And so that's what actually helped me to get through graduate school with no debt is because I knew that I used to say this all the time, I'm not far enough out of poverty to stop working for 3 or 5 years and take on whatever loans to not only pay for school, but to cover my living expenses. So I only applied to graduate programs that would allow me to work full time or very close to full time and had courses in the evenings or on weekends or accelerated programming because I knew I couldn't give up my full time salary for however many years it was going to take me to get out of school.
I want to speak to that because you're bringing back memories. It's been a really long time, but I didn't do it as purposefully as you did. But when I decided to go back and get my MBA, I was I had the opportunity to live with my grandmother, and my grandmother said that she would help as much as she could, so that took care of like living expenses. So then I had the cost of school and, my car payment and other expenses that were going to fall on me. And I think I ended up doing the exact same thing. Like, people, I was living in the Bay Area at the time, people would try to go to Berkeley to get their MBA, and that is like a full-time program for the most part.
Mhm.
And just the prestigiousness of getting in, you take it very seriously, it costs a lot of money. Well, then there was this other school called Cal State Hayward at the time, but now it's called Cal State East Bay in the Bay Area, that was totally oriented to having the MBA program be offered oftentimes in the evenings so
Mhm.
that I could keep working while I was doing this. And so, fortunately, I started a company that actually really took off where I was a fit model. And so, I was a contractor with all these clothing designers all over the Bay Area. So I would drive to my appointments, but I could set up my schedule according to when I had exams and finals and when my classes were and where I needed to be in order to pull it all together. And so I hear you, because it wouldn't have been possible for me to have done that program. And also, I'll say one more thing that probably adds into what you're saying. Interesting enough, the last week of school, so I'm graduating with my MBA, I've gotten through, I only ended up having $2,500 in like student loans to get through the whole thing. And I get a phone call from the school financial aid office, and they're like, "Hey, we just figured out that even though you wouldn't have met the criteria because you don't fit any of these particular boxes, we figured out that we have this grant for $2,500. And if you can get us all of your paperwork tomorrow, you will be awarded this $2,500 grant." And then nobody had claimed. And so they ended up giving me that money. I paid off the loan, and the rest is history. I graduated with no debt from my MBA. So take it over, Darla. I just had to share that.
Ooh, I'm so glad you shared that story because that is actually one of my top tips is it is unlikely that the school will call you, but you can call the school. Whether you're a first year student, a 17th year student, get to know, especially once you have a major or a department, spend some time with the program coordinator. Bring her coffee, take candy from her candy, his or her candy dish, so that they know your face, so that they know what you're interested in, so that they know why you're pursuing that degree or that major, because then when a new scholarship program, a new grant comes along, a new internship, a new professor who's in the department who totally does what you want to study, they'll say, "Hey, Darla, hey, Lisa, have you met the professor yet?" Because that professor might have money for a research assistant. Or they may have students who had so much scholarship money that they were able to turn down their own scholarship money and they have some left over. That happened to me every semester religiously around the midpoint. I'd go into the department chair's office and say, "Hey, department chair." And if I couldn't catch her, I'd send her an email. "Hey, department chair, I'm a this year student. I'm going into next semester and planning ahead. It looks like I'm going to have a tuition gap. Just checking if there's any unused tuition money or scholarships available." Sometimes the answer was no, and sometimes the answer was yes, because the university I attended, when you worked full time for that university, you got 96% off of your tuition. So I had a couple of classmates that after we got through the heavier course loads, like our big math and science classes, they started working full time or almost full time for the university. So that meant those scholarships they had that first year and a half, they no longer needed because it was getting the discount from their now full-time employment. So that money I was able to get. So I got $17,000 in tuition money simply because I asked and they knew I was going to ask every semester.
That is so cool. You just figured out like these are the people that you should know. You said program coordinator. Are there other people that are good to be in touch with?
Yeah, and so it's a little bit easier if you already have a major because then those teams are smaller. There's usually one person who's the program coordinator or the guidance counselor, or the academic advisor for your department or major. If you're at a big university, the financial aid office can also be helpful, but when they're out of scholarship money, they're of course going to just find you more loans. And if your goal is to have as few loans as possible, starting with the department can get you a little further in terms of those creative methods.
Beautiful, beautiful. You said something earlier that I want to go back to, and this is actually just a question that I have now that my son's in school again. Every time we go through the FAFSA process, there's the option of getting like $5,000 or something. And then that is money that I would have to co-sign, right? It's a parent loan and the rates, I don't know, let's say around 5% or something like that. And thankfully, we've passed on it and not needed that money. But y- that's money that I have to back, which I'm not loving. Now, if my son wanted to get financing, is that completely outside of the FAFSA process? Because the only money that's coming through that right now is just, money that I would have to co-sign on. Does that
No,
make
it's
sense?
all to it does make sense. So it's all together. So the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is essentially a common application that collects tax information from parents and student, income information and asset information from parent and student, so that whatever college or university they're going to, they kind of have the same report of this is what the student has access to in terms of paying for this training. Here's what the student might need. So it's kind of all the same no matter what school they're going to. And so there are typically offered parent loans, but if you are not in the position because maybe your tax report says something because you had a really good year the last year or two, but now your business is doing something different or you're no longer working for that company, students do have options to do things on their own. It just means a little bit of additional paperwork and maybe you signing off on something to say, I cannot take responsibility, to make it clear that there's that separation. And so if there are those specific questions, the financial aid office, especially when you can get a really good staff person, which is anyone who's been there more than 2 years, because that's about how long it takes them to get to know the university systems, then they
Hmm.
can answer those questions for you and your student.
So it's interesting. I haven't had, any contact with them, but this is really cool. So literally, if you have questions or something doesn't fit, you're saying you could just reach out to the financial aid office and say, hey,
Mhm.
we're in this system. This is my question. This is what's going on. What are the other options?
That's right, and I highly recommend that the student themselves does this. As the parent, you of course can be on the phone, can be checking on the background, but one, you want your student to be really good at having these conversations because being able to negotiate with financial aid is an amazing precursor for being able to negotiate that first salary.
Hmm.
And it also your student knows what they're trying to accomplish in terms of whether they think they'll have to be in school that extra year or extra semester based on their major. And while you're an involved parent, you don't know the ins and outs about how many credits they do and don't need in most cases. And so it's great for your student to drive this process and you kind of being there to support.
Yep. That's great. Okay. I
And
love it.
also tell your student to show up in person because it's real easy to hang up the phone, but it's not so easy to dismiss a student who's sitting right there and asking you a question with a big smile.
Ah, that's so good. Oh my gosh. My husband, I like, yeah, we have a hard time getting him to do things. So I'm gonna like really put some emphasis around this. I think it's so important for them to be a part of the process and take that responsibility. And I feel like my son really did great in getting a grant originally for a merit, like based on his GPA, he got the tuition down from maybe 13,000 a year to like $4,000 a year because of his grades. And so, that's a big, like only having, $4,000. I mean, is
You could
that
put that
five?
on a payment plan. In most families, they could figure that out over the course of many
Yeah,
months, right?
totally. Totally. The majority of his expenses are just living expenses, living in
Mhm.
a dorm, right? And food. And he's cutting back on food. I'm like, are you getting enough food? Because he picked the cheapest plan. That's another way, I guess, of saving money. I'll just say, way better stuff than me, but I'll just say there's like the unlimited food plan,
Yes.
right? And we knew that wasn't it. And then there's like a medium food plan where you get a couple meals a day,
Mhm.
and then you get like the one meal a day.
Yes.
And in the end, my son was like, Mom, we're going to set my dorm room up with like a refrigerator, a rice cooker, a microwave, a coffee maker. I don't know what else. And he's going to go to Sam's Club or Costco, get food. And he's like, I can make one meal a day work. And he's did it all last year. And it saved us like, uh, I don't know, like $4,000
I'm
last year
sure.
alone for the 2 semesters, just by doing it this way. So
Yeah.
I guess there's another way to pay for school.
No, it is, and I'm so glad you brought up the dorm and the meal plans because that's one of the things to pay attention to is looking at the meal plan that your child or student has, is it the right for how they eat? I know that when I was in college, the dorm food was actually really good. So I loved having the unlimited plan. It also helped me manage my hunger and my schedule better. I didn't have to like only go at breakfast and lunch because if I had the unlimited plan, I could run in, grab an apple, grab a bagel, go to my first class, come back, actually eat a real meal, leave, come back between classes or between work. And that really worked well for me. But I had friends and classmates who were like, I cannot stand the dorm food here. Like the minimum they make me buy is one meal a day. So that's what we have. And so that's an easy way to manage the overall living cost. The other piece is living in the dorm, depending on where the university is. Sometimes living in the dorm is the better value. Sometimes living off campus is a better value. But if you have a student who's at least a sophomore, make sure and it won't like trigger any anxieties or issues for them. Have them apply to be a resident advisor. You know, that older student on the hall who's kind of there to make sure people don't get too drunk or if someone's sad or feeling out of place, that they can direct them to the resources on campus. Those jobs are so good for a bunch of reasons. One, you get a really high quality training program from the university because they want you to be good at your job. So you get hours and hours of training that you can put on your resume. You get sometimes a small stipend, and even without the stipend, you get free room and board. Free, cost you nothing. So when I was an undergraduate, my husband, he was my husband then, but he's like a year behind me in school. Plus, he took a fifth year. He took a what do you call those? A victory lap because he had changed his major later, and so he had to take a few more classes to get that degree finished. And so he applied over and over again to be a resident advisor, and he finally got selected when he was that 5th year senior. And then he stayed at the university as a master student. So that first year of graduate school, he stayed in the dorms as a resident advisor, and it made a huge difference in his cost of attendance as a graduate student. Huge, like
Wow.
tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow. That is amazing. And I mean, there's kind of a piece of it to me where he let go of his pride. He let go of like any ideas like, oh, I shouldn't be in this dorm situation. He like made the better, higher choice for himself. Like, it's better for me to save the money and do this, which I just think is awesome. So awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
And my son applied, but he didn't get selected for the sophomore year. He's also in a honors program where
Mhm.
they pretty much required that you live in the dorm for 2 years, which
Okay.
is at his university. I think it is slightly more expensive than living on your own. So I'm looking forward to saving some money next year.
Yeah. And and depending on where you all are and how much housing costs there, I have classmates who I didn't even think their parents were well off enough to do it, but I had classmates who had they knew they were planning to have 3 students go there. They had 1 student who was like a sophomore, 1 who was going to be a freshman, and then they had a younger sister who they were hoping would also go to the university. So they end up buying a condo, and at one point or another, each of the 3 kids lived in the condo, and then the parents had intended that they would just retire and move there because they liked the city that the university was in, but they were making so much rent money from it, they just stayed at home.
That's so funny. So,
Yeah.
like, we'll cut you a deal if you stay at home and we rent it to someone else, then
Yeah.
yeah, we've definitely thought about that for the 3rd and 4th year, just, depending on the market, if there's opportunity to get a good value, to buy a place. Yeah, and then they manage the collection of the rents for the other people that are living with them.
That's right, so they get property management experience.
Yeah. That's
So we're building
awesome.
our budgets and our resumes.
Yeah, yeah. Have you always been this way? Have you always been, like, thinking about the different scenarios? Like, is this just the way your
Absolutely.
brain works?
It's partially because growing up, and I don't mean to, talk bad about any of the grown-ups in my life, but I had to be my own safety net for a lot of reasons. And so one of the ways that I made my safety net strings really strong and tight and secure is I always had plan A, B, C, D, and there's some way around this. I have seen people figure it out, and I am really smart. So if I ask enough questions, I'll get to the answer I need so that I can get the information or the resource or the money or the tool or the meal or whatever it is that I need to get to the next step because I cannot stay here.
So, I really love this, and I'd actually like to go a little deeper into understanding this mindset. And I understand that part of it is necessity, like the life that we have, we end up adapting and doing things a certain way.
Mhm.
But after a while, my guess is that you're not just looking at it backwards, like you're looking at how can I take what I had to learn out of necessity and turn it into a business, turn it into a way that I pay it forward. But when you look at it that way and you think about the people that you've supported and helped, financially coach along the way, what is that mindset switch that people have to go through? Because not everybody is like you and me, where they're not all like, okay, how am I going to make this work? Like they just didn't come from those same roots, but they
Mhm.
need the skills just as
Mhm.
bad, if not more than we do. So what's that mindset shift that people have to make to do it this way?
So what I noticed about the women, mostly the women who were the heads of households in my life, in my family, is they were actually really incredibly good with money. They just didn't have enough of it. And so what I learned from watching them is that they knew really well how to live without, how to stretch, how to borrow, how to beg. What is it? How's it go? Beg, borrow, steal, right? How to make something stretch, how to collectively come together to figure it out. So I saw them do that in their community of sisters and cousins and aunts and uncles, right? And what I realized when I went to college with some very well off classmates, one of my classmates drove a Range Rover to campus and had special permission that his parents somehow arranged to get a parking pass, even though undergraduate students were not supposed to be eligible for parking passes, so that he could have his Range Rover on campus in an on campus parking spot. Right. And I remember, and I don't know who taught me this, but I remember thinking, if this dude, who actually was a very nice guy, and thank goodness for his parents who'd raised him to be a very nice person, um, who has all the things available to him, made it to this university, and I'm here with him. The only difference between me and him is I got to learn about the money because I got here with little help. And so if I can figure the money part out, watch out, world. And so part of it, the shift is being like, do you realize how much skill, how much knowledge, how much practice you have with this? It's just right now, you're using it to survive. You're using it to live without money, which you got to turn those on their head, teach you a slightly different way to do it so that you can learn how to live with money and enjoy it.
Yeah, that is really, really good. A really great observation. I think the place that people really struggle is maybe you haven't had role models that have shown what you're talking about. But that's why I think both of us are here is we want to educate people that just because you may not have come from very much, or the other situation I also see a lot is like people might be born into comfortable homes, but then something happens, in their youth or in their teens or when they're going to college, and like what they thought was going to happen totally doesn't happen, and all of a sudden they're scrambling, having not been exposed to money, not been
Mhm.
taught about how to figure things out when there aren't the resources. And so they have to develop this whole new mindset. And what you're talking about is thinking to yourself, maybe I haven't got the experience with money in the way that I want, but I have all this other knowledge and all this other wisdom. And there's probably some area in your life where you were like the underdog. What
Mhm.
are those skills that you had to apply in those situations? Can you bring them over to this experience with money and give yourself a break, give yourself a chance to like do something different? And what I also hear in what you're saying is this like tenacity to like never give up, like never
Don't do it.
forsake yourself.
Nope. And talk good to yourself, because if you are transitioning from never having like not having years or months or days of hunger or bad money or debt or whatever it is, it's hard to start, and it does not serve you. Let me say it again. It does not serve you to feel bad about yourself. It does not serve you to talk bad to yourself. And so change the words you use. So when stop saying, I'm so stupid, I'm the worst. Like, you know what? I'm learning every day. Okay, now I know I got to do something different. I used to be broke, but I'm understanding. We don't say things like I'm broke. We don't say things like, like I can't afford that can work or not if you use it the right way. But what you say matters about yourself to yourself, because your ears are actually the first to hear the words that come out of your mouth. And in fact, that's one of the most effective ways to train your brain is if you can't get your brain to stop saying things like I'm so stupid, I make mistakes, I don't know how to do money, is start saying I'm great with money. I'm learning something every day. I'm on my way. I have the right people around me. I have books to read. I have podcasts to listen to. I'm on my way. Because when it comes out of your mouth and it hits your ear, then your brain processes it differently.
I totally hear that. I think that that voice that you're describing would also be really important, if you are a parent and you're getting, you're realizing your child's 15, 16, 17, they want to go to college and there hasn't been money saved up to help them do that. you might need to focus on your mindset before you do anything else. Like, how are you talking to yourself? Are you being kind? Are you being compassionate? Are you understanding that you have been doing the best that you possibly could every step of the way, and you simply didn't realize what was going to happen for whatever reason, or you didn't know how to cover it. But when you start moving into this idea of, okay, how do we make this possible? We've talked about, grants. We've talked a little bit about scholarships. I mean, what I'm hearing is, first and foremost, and we didn't say this, but I want to make sure that I'm on the same page, is it's your responsibility, your student, or you, if you are the student, it's your responsibility to exhaust every single possible resource to see what you might qualify for, what could be out there. Do you have a rule of thumb of how much time you might want to invest in this process as you're heading into, the beginning, having a freshman in college and being able to pay for it? Like, how much time? Because I feel like I remember when I was doing some of this with my son, mostly he did it, but I was like, you could spend weeks like exploring. So how much time is reasonable to
So it depends on
yeah.
how big your need is, right? I had a big need, right? I didn't have any help. So if I had any gap, I had to figure out how to close it. So I spent as much time as it took. If you have a smaller gap, then you don't have to spend as much time and you can focus more on how do I get a really enriching experience at this university? How do I keep my GPA strong? Because that's also a pro tip is when you are transitioning from high school to college, 8 a.m. is not the same in high school or college. 9 a.m. is not even the same in high school or college. And so build that first semester as light as you can, that 12 credit minimum, that 13 credit minimum, because guess what? When you start college, you start with a 4.0 and it's your job to keep it up. And if you, whatever scholarships you had access to when you came in as a first year student, once you have that nice, strong freshman GPA, guess what? A whole new world of scholarships and grants are now open to you because you have a strong college GPA. And so make sure that your student understands that even if they're honors, even if they're super smart, even if they had a million AP classes, to use that first semester to build a strong foundation of friends, of organizations they want to be a part of learning the university resources and keeping that 4.0 as close to 4.0 as possible. Because then there's a whole new set of scholarships and grants that they get to be qualified for as a second year student.
So I didn't even know that. And I love that you're saying this, because my son did end up pulling a 4.0 his first year, but we didn't go back. Well, he was supposed to, and I don't think he did, because there's no grants or new scholarships. But is it too late for the second year? Like, could we still go and look, or would we be needing to wait till the end of the school year before we start doing it?
Always ask, because making a phone call or a drop in or an email to the financial aid office, it could be a no, we don't have anything, try again at this time of year, or it could be actually, thank you for asking.
Okay.
We did have some things open up, or we got a new donation, or there's a new program. And every year it's never too late, because as a freshman, there most of the things are based on your high school GPA. As a sophomore, things are starting to be based off of your first year GPA. But once you're a junior or senior, now you're actually in your major, right? And so your department or your school may have specific scholarships for your degree program. And so it's never too late. I know that each year my aid package changed dramatically, because some scholarships I had for the first 2 years, some scholarships I had for all 4 years, some scholarships I didn't get until my senior year because of my GPA, or because of some new program that became available. And so it can change drastically every year, and you just want it to change drastically in your favor.
Very cool. The work study that you talked about,
Mhm.
how do you, so here's that balance of, like, I think part of the reason my son did get great grades last year is he, even when it got really stressful, he wasn't distracted with other things. He didn't have to work that first year, and we sort of made a decision that we would just see how it goes. And he definitely needed that adjustment. It was a lot harder. He's engineering it, there's a lot going on. So, how do you figure out when someone has the capacity to fit in work study and not jeopardize like their GPA, for example?
So the good news about work study is those are on-campus jobs, and on-campus jobs can be as strenuous and physical labor as being the gardening people who change the flowers so that the campus looks beautiful all the time and cut the grass and actually keep up, to working in the cafeteria as a card swiper, to sitting in the library at the information desk to point people to the restroom, to cutting fruits and vegetables in the cafeteria. And so those on-campus work study jobs can be a huge spectrum of how much effort, physical labor, and brain power you have to use at those jobs. And so you can also look for a job that fits your needs. So I know my sister, we went to the same university for a couple of years. She worked in the cafeteria because she always wanted to learn how to cook, and she was like, "Well, this way I'll learn." And so she can till this day make these beautiful fruit arrangements because she learned how to cut fruit when she worked in the dorm cafeteria. But after that first year, she was like, "Actually, I need a job where I can sit and study because I have kind of hard classes." So then she switched to being a card swiper at the gym. And all you don't even have to look at people at the gym. You take their card, you swipe it, you say, "Come in, we close in 30 minutes," right? Like, and so you can find one of those on-campus jobs that fits your need to be able to study, or if you that's how you're going to socialize. And there's a huge diversity of jobs. You just have to find the one that's the right fit. And the good news about work study is if you don't work and don't use all the money, it just means you didn't work and you didn't use all the money, and that's okay. Because you can quit jobs on campus just like you can quit jobs out in real life.
Hmm. Yeah, there's probably even more understanding, like, hey, this is too much for me, or what have
Mhm.
you. Anything else in regard to, you're close to going to school, or you're in school, like you said, or you're doing a master's program? Any other ideas you want to talk about? I have another question, but just wanted to open it up.
No, tell me your question.
Well, we were talking a lot about as you get really close, but I'm also curious about what suggestions you have that help people become more prepared financially earlier in life. Like, what strategies have you found have been your favorite?
Make sure your teenager has a job. It can be any job. But it just has to be a job that pays them, because earning, understanding that we trade, at least in the beginning of our lives, trade our time for money, and understanding that time value of money in that context is really incredibly valuable, right? Like, make sure your teenager has a job. It can be as informal as babysitting, or as formal as you got them an internship at your company or someone else's company in the family, right? But your
Hmm.
teenager needs at least a year of work under their belt by the time they go to college. Even if they don't work again until after they fully graduate, working as a teen is really helpful.
I agree completely. 100%. Yes, definitely. And when parents are saving, there's like retirement savings, and there's paying the bills, and people have been struggling because of inflation. Like, is there a rule of thumb of like a minimum amount to put towards education
There isn't,
funds?
and that's because so much of it, there are so many variables at play. And frankly, I have to disclose, so the system in my book about how to prioritize where you put your money, I call it the paycheck playbook. And frankly, I've got the kids on their last. And I'll tell you why. Because in my life, in my context, in my world, as frequently the safety net for other people in my family, I knew that I had to make my situation as secure as possible so that I could not only catch myself, but anyone else who needed to be caught. Right. And so, what that means is that I prioritize making sure the bills are paid. And then we put into emergency fund, and then we invest usually through retirement style accounts. And then we add the other things like paying off the house or the car, the bigger debt that isn't as harmful to your overall financial situation. And then really building up strong investments, maybe through real estate or through brokerage or other types of businesses. And then at the very last step, that's where the kids come in. Because in my brain, and what I've been practicing so far, is I can take care of the kids if I'm good. But if I've locked up hundreds of thousands of dollars into the kids' accounts, I can't get access to it the same way. And all things work the way they should. I keep drinking my water, my vegetables, and exercising. I will be here and my income will continue to grow so that I can help bridge whatever gaps come up when my current 4 and 6-year-old are ready to go to college, because I will have been putting into my own retirement. I will have been putting into our own family investments and businesses. So, however much we put aside for the kids, even if it's a small pile, it all helps because we have other places to pull from because I've been building those things primarily.
Yep.
But I
Oh
know
my
that that's
gosh.
not everybody's.
I think you are so smart. I think you're brilliant. And it's so funny that you say this because this is exactly what my husband and I have done. And I felt like, even though I was in the financial services business and I was, telling people about financial different ways to save for college, I was never a really big proponent on getting into the 529 accounts and the other things because I wasn't doing it. And um, my husband and I are very heavily involved in real estate development and real estate investing, and we've done that for 30 years. And so the idea of putting money aside that we might need to cover a shortfall didn't make any sense. And so we have followed exactly what you're saying. We have the money available. The kids, like I said, they help as much as they can. I haven't even talked about my daughter. My daughter got her education was about $100,000 all in for 4 years at the State University, Polytechnic University in California, for room and board and
Mhm.
tuition, and she got 51,000 of that covered through different scholarships and
Mhm.
grants that she was awarded. So she was able to use money that was inherited for her education fund when my mom passed away from her estate. So that helped her. And then my son as well had money left over. When my mom passed away, the money was put into an account and that paid for a year and a half of Aiden's school. So but we couldn't touch that money. But if that money had been mine, I probably would have touched it to make more money and then give it back.
Right.
So I hear you. I love this. I love the out of box thinking. I think you are spot on, and I love that we have this in common because until you said that, I kind of felt a little bit of shame, like, oh, we didn't do it the way that other people do. But you're making me feel better because we
Yeah.
took care of what was important.
And
And
if something happens next year where you have to come fully out of pocket for your son's education, you'll figure it out just like you figured it out all along the way, right? And so it's tapping into that belief in yourself that whatever bridge you have to cross, you will know how to cross it, and making sure that your legs are strong and your swimming arms can swim just in case you fall in the water, right?
yeah,
You know?
yes, exactly. I love it. So be sure, share. You have a book coming out. So we want to talk about that. And like what would be people's next steps if they want to work with you? How can they work with you? What do you want to share?
Yes. Okay. So the easiest way to find me is my website, darlabishop.com. And yes, I have my emotional support copy right here. So this is my book baby, and the emotional support copy that's all wrinkled and marked up. How to Afford Everything. This is available now in all retailers. I just got accepted into Target, so you can even get it at Target.
Yay!
And because I've been talking about this education piece, because I know how heavy student loan burden is. And as a public health professional, prevention, 1 ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if we can get ahead of these students before they get into these really expensive degrees in graduate school and help them find a little way to chip away at that cost, they can make a big difference for the trajectory of their life. And so a few of my posts about this got really popular. And I was like, well, it seems like people are interested in this. I need to put it all in one place. So I wrote a very short, I think last edit was like a 7 page ebook that has all these steps that we've talked about, plus a few more, along with an actual email template that I use to email my chair every semester to ask for money, so that folks can just start to think about, okay, what are the ways we can get the cost of this education, which is absolutely an investment in myself and my future, just a little bit lower so it doesn't delay my beautiful, bright financial future that's waiting for me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's like you're one step ahead of us. I definitely have to get a copy of the new book. And I'm so happy that we could have this conversation. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I hope someone hears it and just feels good. Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. I have to say one last thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that sometimes doesn't get said in conversations like this is, what if loans are my only option? Do I not go to school? I will tell you that for my life, going to college and graduate school was absolutely what I needed to build my network, to see how other people lived and interacted with one another and money. And so I would never regret making my student loan payment. And so if that's what you have to do in order to get to college that first year, do it. And while you're there in that first year, make a plan to be your RA, to get more scholarships, to find a donor. But if that's the only way you can get to school and then kill it once you get there.
I love it. Yeah. And we've talked about the fact that you have options beyond that first year. So do not forget about those options. Like, don't just go into sort of robot mode. Well, I did it this way and I'll do it again. Like, keep asking the questions, questioning the assumptions, all of those things. Because what we're hearing is that you can put a dent in these expenses by being creative and by asking all the right people questions. So
Mhm.
I'm learning a lot. I've written all these notes down. I'm gonna go be making some phone calls to my son to see what he's gonna do. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Darla. I'm so happy.
Yes, thank you.